And I believe the taxes kick in year 1 and the benefits not till year 4, Chair?
The important thing is, I believe, at the end of the 10-year window, it is still positive. So I think that's actually, that's not what's getting you that good number.
Well, I wonder what the next 10 years, when you have 10 years of spending and 10 years of taxes on that.
That's when you lose, that's when it saves $1 trillion or 1.1 trillion.
Good Lord, I hope you're right.
I hope the Congressional Budget Office is right.
I want to talk about the uncertainty factor that's out there, because surely you're hearing that. Well, I know the President called to a number of business leaders and they cited to him the series of uncertainties, why they're not employing, and looking forward, which hopefully you are, I'm sure you're looking forward, saying, look, how do we get these guys to put money in the game, men and women that are investing, creating jobs, trying to create an atmosphere for growth. One of the things that people stare at as saying it's going to drive up cost is the cap and trade proposed legislation that passed the House. Your Chapter 9 of the Economic Report, the President supports cap and trade, carbon emissions, transform the energy sector. But CBO questions the premises for cap and trade, how policies reduce greenhouse gas emissions could affect employment. In the May 5th report, they say emission reduction policies would decrease employment in energy-intensive industries. Quote, would eventually the economy would return to full employment, average wages would be lower than that would otherwise prevail because of the higher cost of energy would reduce the productivity of the economy. That's a direct quote of the CBO report. Given the uncertainty, given the difficulty we're having in the economy, would the administration now say it is not time to pass cap and trade legislation?
So let me first talk about the uncertainty, because it is something that we hear a lot from business. And I think the important thing to realize is what have been the major sources of uncertainty over the last 18 months? It's been the financial crisis. It's been the terrible recession. That's the #1 thing we have worked with the Congress to try to turn around, what the Federal Reserve has been working on, what Secretary Geithner worked on with the Financial Stability Plan. And I think that has been incredibly important. Also, on the regulatory side, I think as was made, the statement that's made very well, often,
I'm going to really run out of time.
Okay.
Do you have cap and trade opinion? I just was asking you directly about cap and trade and its uncertainty factor.
What the President has said is he actually thinks getting a sensible energy legislation, like many other changes that we make, can help to resolve uncertainty, because people understand what the framework is. And what we do know is that we have a problem. We are dependent on foreign oil.
Well, even though CBO says this is going to drive employment down and wages down, you're for cap and trade at this point in time in our economy.
You know, we are for a comprehensive program that counteracts many of those things by investing in clean energy, by trying to jumpstart the clean energy economy. We think a lot of, that can have very positive employment.
Do you believe emission reduction policies would decrease employment in energy-intensive industries?
I think it's going to affect different industries in different ways, right?
What about
it's going to tend to support renewable energy, for example.
What about in an energy-intensive industry?
I think we're going to have to develop it very well. That's something that the bills are being very careful to try to make sure that we minimize any costs on some industries and grow some others.
You're an economist. You're an excellent economist. You know this is going to drive down employment in energy-intensive industry.
You know, what it's going to do is to change the nature of what we produce. We think that's something we need to do.
Will it drive down employment in energy-intensive industry?
I think it's going to depend on how we design it. I think that's going to be the basic thing that has to happen.
So you honestly believe it might not drive down employment in an energy-intensive industry? It's what the CBO has said. It's what every economist that I've read.
So we're certainly going to need to, I'd certainly need to think more about the evidence. I think the other thing is, right, the whole thing that the President's trying to do is to invest in new energy technologies, clean energy technologies. That's the way you're going to counteract any, if you're making carbon fuels more expensive, the way you can counteract that is come up with alternative energy. And the President
will this make carbon fuels more expensive?
So certainly what a cap-and-trade system is designed to do is to, as the President has described, is to put a price on carbon.
And it will make carbon-intensive fuels more expensive.
The most likely, and then what you have to do is to think about how do you deal with those consequences, and you have to, you have to remember why we're doing this. No one would choose to do
I understand
this
why we're doing
if there weren't
this.
a problem.
And I also watch Europe, what they're doing of backing away from some of these policies now because their economy is in such difficulty. And I'm thinking, why shouldn't we be watching what's taking place there if that's the same sort of track that we're looking at going down? And if they've already pursued that very aggressively, and now are saying, no, wait a minute, look at what it's costing us and look at how difficult this is, maybe we ought to just take a moment and say, well, let's watch what happens here, and let's look at this for a little while and see that we don't hurt ourselves in the process in an already soft economy, which I think with all you've been saying today, I believe you think this is still a soft economy. I'm not quite sure, but I believe that's what you think.
It is still a soft economy. It is an economy that is recovering, and as Ms. Klobuchar described, we want it to be recovering faster. Can I actually say the President has been having a very positive message here, which is let's be growing the alternative energy sector.
I am
That's
all
why
for
he's
that.
been investing.
I'm all for growing the positive end of it. Just don't tax and kill all the other end of it in the process. That's why I always think you do these things by investment and innovation, not by taxes and regulation. So you grow it and you push it. We've got a hydrogen fuel cell locomotive we built in Topeka, Kansas. BNSF and the Army's done it. Beautiful example. But it's an investment and an innovation. It isn't us telling the railroads you got to go to this type of a technology. And that's how you move through these. But on the deficit reduction, because I know you've got to be concerned about the deficit. You've said you're concerned about the deficit. It's being added to at $55,000 a second under the Obama administration. Just had the budget director leave office. Financial Times reports June 27th that he resigned, quote, frustration over his lack of success in persuading the administration to tackle the fiscal deficit more aggressively. And we're looking at nearly trillion-dollar deficits throughout the next decade. I really hope you can tell us how we're going to start getting away from this borrowing 40 cents of every dollar we're spending right now and move in a positive direction. We need to.
All right, so I think we should very much separate the current deficit, which to a very large degree is being caused by the terrible recession that we have been through, and our long-run fiscal problem, which I absolutely agree is a serious problem and something that we need to be dealing with. I think if you talk to Director Orszag and you talk to the President, what you will hear is they are both in complete agreement about how important it is to deal with our deficit over time. That's why our budget charts a path to get the deficit down to 4% of GDP by 2015, and then sets up the Fiscal Commission, encouraging it to then have a goal of getting it down to 3% of GDP or even further. So that is a very carefully worked out plan and something that absolutely is important, and it's going to take people from both sides of the aisle. That's why the Fiscal Commission is there. This is going to be a hard problem. No one side can solve it by themselves, and we absolutely need to reach that consensus.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. If you have a second round, I'd like to add another set of questions.